Wholeness. Hoping to address some anxiety and some ways to combat that. I actually dealt with a little bit of anxiety before doing this. And I find that the best approach is to just be transparent up front and then to go into whatever it is that you want to do. So, first thing you do when you're feeling anxious is you remind yourself, I'm anxious. That's it. Start off. Make yourself a card if you need to. Pull it out your pocket like, I'm anxious, right? But the other part you got to flip over and write on the other side, I'm feeling anxious, right? So instead of identifying yourself as the anxiety, I'm feeling anxiety, right? I'm who I am. I'm my name. I'm feeling this. So that's what you write on the other side of it. And then that'll help you to start to reframe it, right? Anxiety is connected to fear. So you can even write that if you want to. I'm afraid. And then on the other side of it, I'm feeling fear, right? So then you do that. And that's firstly identifying it as something that you're experiencing and not just the entirety of your being, right? Because, a lot of times that kind of perpetuates it. So you identify the fear first by accepting it, because a lot of times we're so quick to get into this spin where we want to absolve everything and we don't even actually know exactly what we're experiencing mechanic to mechanic. We're just, because the body is a chemical factory. That's one thing you also have to identify. The body is a chemical factory. The brain is the one that releases all the chemicals, through the base of the spine and the cortisol, the different, literally our body makes stress chemicals. These are things that are meant for survival, but in a situation where it's a little bit more controlled, it can cause self-implosion, in certain scenarios where we're activating the survival mechanic in an emotionally stressful situation, right? So, not to go on a tangent, but accept the fear and realize that, hey, I want something, I don't know how to get it. This makes me frustrated. This makes me stressed. This makes me afraid. This makes me anxious, right? Because a lot of times the anxiety comes when we want something, and we may have learned to identify strong desire as a negative presence, where if we want something that's connected to a person, which is usually the case, and we don't know how to approach that, we'll go into our brain and start creating all these scenarios. We'll project this scenario and we'll exist in that scenario to a large degree, right? We'll exist in that scenario to the point where it causes us to feel real feelings, right? And this is all happening in the mind. Okay, so you gotta first identify it, because what fear is a distressing emotion aroused by perceived danger, right? And danger is the possibility of suffering harm or injury. So it's only identifying a possibility. And possibilities, last time I checked, they move both directions. Actually, they move all around. They can go anywhere. So you just know that you're in a state of being polarized when you're using your mind to perceive a possibility as more being on one end than being possible to be on any end that it chooses to be on. So, what do you do next after you've identified the fear? All right, a lot of times that fear and that anxiety comes because you're not in control, or you don't perceive to be in control. A lot of people who've been through traumatizing events are now in a space where they feel better either being in complete control or someone else being in complete control that they identify as they love them or something like that. So it's either being in complete control or being in a complete submissive state to someone that they identify loves them. One of those two. So what you do is you find something that you can control. This is to remind yourself that you're in charge, because your brain's now started to identify all of these litany of factors. It's put you in this conflictive mind state, which is very easy. The mind is very susceptible to conflict. It's how we're built. It's nothing wrong with it. It's just how we're built, and we have to learn to balance it out, right? So all of the conflicted thoughts come in, pushing you to externalize the stress. That's the one thing you want to do, is not externalize the stress. So write that down. Don't externalize the stress. The stress comes from inside the body, the chemical factory, the chemicals that are being released into the spinal fluid, the cortisol, stress enzyme. You can look that up. Cortisol is the stress chemical that the brain releases. So don't externalize the conflict, the stress. Don't externalize it. You may have done that in the past. So you find something you can control, whether that be going to your room. That's a good step. But what you do when you're in the room, for instance, like me, sometimes I just stimulate my vagus nerve. Sometimes I just press onto the earlobe, both sides, do some circles, and hum in the lowest pitch I can, and cascade upward like And that may not work if you don't have a deeper voice. You're not causing too much vibration. But also you can just breathe. Breathe in through the nose. Hold it. Pinch your nose. Release it and do that a couple times. That's a good exercise. Obviously meditation, yoga, different things like that. Find something you can be in charge of. I like to create. That's another advanced step. I like to either maybe put something together, even if I'm not gonna eat. I'll just whip up a dough and be like, okay, I'll make a dough for tomorrow. Put some tofu and some flour together or something, like make a dough, saute some veggies, put together a salad, chop something, and something that you can control. And this is to help you to guide yourself into changing the narrative that's being created in the mind, because anxiety comes from an overactive mind, or that's one of the side effects of anxiety. So the overactive mind is telling you all sorts of things. So you now have to change the narrative. You have to remind yourself that you're in control and that you're in charge. Okay? So that's what you have to do. Now, when it comes to dealing with other people, like I said, don't externalize the stress. If you've dealt with people in a certain way where you really haven't mastered how to articulate yourself when you're in the face of a strong emotion, you may have caused people to feel or associate you being in these stressful modes as dangerous or something that will cause them stress. So last thing you want to do is learn and make a stigma of yourself that you just, when you feel stress, you just spread stress on everybody. That's the last thing you want to do, because then it makes it a lot more difficult for those people to associate you having strong feelings with any sort of resolutionary means. So this is why you want to de-stress before, and then find out what actually it is that you want. Is there a desire underneath all this fear? Find what that is. It may be something like, I want to feel like this. I want to feel like they care about me. I want to feel like I'm noticed. I want to feel appreciated. And you write these things down and you find a really precise manner to approach it in. And you got to be calm. Because now you have to rewrite the narrative externally too. So as you're rewriting the narrative internally, you bring that's what you bring to people. Like, hey, I apologize for all the times that I reacted like this in the past. You know what I mean? I did not mean to stress you out. However, this is what I was dealing with. And you begin to articulate that. And when you do that, man, people are going to be blown away. They're like, wow, I expected this to totally go bad, but we actually were able to talk. You know what I'm saying? We're actually able to, I actually understand exactly what you're saying and what you may need. And then you can come to a form of agreement, whether that person's able to meet that need or whether you'll have to find a means outside of sourcing them as the person. Because what you're doing sometimes is you're consistently putting off all the stress. Oh, this person just needs to do this. Oh, they just need to do that. Oh, they just need to do this. And you'll do this in circles. And the one thing you have control over is you. So that's what I'll say. And also to any metaphysical advice, that's why I didn't go too deep into the actual metaphysics of it, because when you start to identify entities and things that are feeding off of your fear and your stress, you know, and you still haven't learned how not to externalize the stress that you feel from another person, this is not really the best approach, because you're going to just externalize it like, oh, okay, this entity came and it made me this. You know, no, you're in charge of all of that. So don't use metaphysical knowledge to externalize your plight. Take it in. And this is what I have for today. And hopefully this shed some light on some ways you can approach anxiety and fear. Much love. Wholeness.